Welcome back to the aniplot. This is a new story, and the name of our main character is Haruka. The story begins with school scene. On an average school day, Haruka sits alone at his desk like the professional loner he is. He's fully aware of his status as a social outcast, but honestly, he prefers it. The alternative would be mingling with his classmates, whom he absolutely cannot stand. His class is divided into the usual cliques: the delinquents, the popular girls, the gym bros, and the forgettable nobodies. Haruka doesn't fit into any of them, and he's perfectly fine with that. More solitude means more time to read his books, until his peaceful reading session is rudely interrupted by a sudden, glowing light beneath him. A summoning circle begins forming under the students, and for a brief moment, Haruka actually gets excited. After all, this can only mean one thing: an isekai adventure. But then, a chilling realization hits him. He's been getting way too much screen time for a background character. And if anime rules have taught him anything, it's that loners in isekai stories usually get screwed over in some way. Not happening, not before GTA 6 drops. Determined to avoid whatever fate awaits him, Haruka makes a run for the door while the portal is still loading. Unfortunately, it's magically sealed shut. No matter how hard he pushes, kicks, or bangs his head against it in frustration, the door won't budge. Meanwhile, his classmates begin disappearing, vanishing into the swirling light one by one. Desperate, Haruka comes up with a genius plan: crawl into the ceiling vents and wait out the summoning. He jumps up, wriggles into the roof, and settles in, thinking he's safe. But just as he starts feeling smug, the summoning circle follows him through the ceiling. And just like that, he's dragged into another world anyway. Great. So much for dodging fate. Haruka expects to be greeted by the usual isekai welcoming committee, a fat king, or a pretty princess begging for his help. But instead, he opens his eyes to find a panicked, bald old man waving his arms around like a malfunctioning, inflatable tube guy. Turns out, this old man is God, and he's the one responsible for the summoning. Apparently, all of Haruka's classmates have already been sent off, but his genius idea to hide in the ceiling caused a summoning error. Now, God has to fix his mistake before the higher-ups find out. To make amends, he offers Haruka some abilities for his new life. Sounds great, right? Wrong. Since Haruka is late, all the good skills have already been taken. What's left are the scraps no one wanted, like Minecraft villager, gambling dice, contact lenses, and a stick. To make matters worse, Haruka has a limited number of skills he can choose. Furious, he unleashes his wrath on the so-called god for dragging him here with nothing but trash abilities. But the old man isn't about to take lip from a high schooler. He didn't graduate from God University just to get yelled at. So, as a form of apology, and mainly to get rid of him, he grants Haruka all the leftover skills and promptly teleports him away. Cool. More skills than usual. Not cool? He's been dumped in the middle of a forest with no supplies. Just as he's about to panic, he notices a pouch on the ground, part of his Minecraft villager skill. Turns out, it lets him store an unlimited number of items in his inventory. And luckily, there's some starter gear inside. At least he's not completely doomed. Now geared up, Haruka decides to check his stats. But thanks to his gambling dice skill, he has to roll for his stat points. With no other choice, he tosses the dice onto the ground and lands on M. What the hell is M? Since he has no clue, he just dumps all his M points into his luck stat. When he opens his status window, he's shocked to find that his luck is completely maxed out. Great, but also kind of a waste. He could have used that on something actually useful. While scrolling through his stats, Haruka finds two unexpected skills. Because he was such a massive loner back on Earth, he physically cannot form a party in this world, even if he wants to. But in exchange, his second skill lets him force monsters to serve him, since making actual friends is off the table. Haruka sighs, so much for forming a harem. But hey, it is what it is. Haruka is more concerned with the fact that he doesn't see any of his classmates nearby. That's a little weird, considering this is supposed to be the starting location. Then again, he never cared about them before, so why would he start now? Right now, his top priority is gathering supplies so he can live a comfortable life out in the woods. Easier said than done though, he can barely see anything with all these trees in the way. At this rate, it won't be long before he accidentally stumbles into a monster. And if that happens, well, let's just say he'd rather not die before he even gets to enjoy his new isekai life. Then it hits him, he has a contact lens skill. He quickly puts on the lenses, and suddenly, all kinds of information about his surroundings pop up in front of him. Turns out, these lenses come with a built-in appraisal skill, allowing him to navigate the forest with ease. Using it, he spots some edible mushrooms that won't kill him, a rare find in fantasy worlds. He picks as many as he can, stuffing them into his villager bag, which, thankfully, lets him carry an unlimited amount of junk. Next, he heads to a nearby river, using his bag to scoop up some drinking water. Once he's done, something catches his eye deeper in the forest. Curious, he wanders over and discovers a cave. It looks interesting, and against all common sense, he decides to check it out. Just in case there's something waiting to eat him inside, he says a quick prayer before stepping in. To his relief, the cave is monster-free and surprisingly spacious. It could actually make for a solid base. Deciding to claim it, he pulls out a tent and a magic lantern from his bag, setting up camp. Then, using temperature control magic, he lights a small fire to stay warm for the night. Coincidentally, using his magic even once unlocks a new fire-based skill, and his paranoia about monsters rewards him with several detection skills as well. Things are looking up. There's just one problem. His only attack skill is a stick. He's going to have to figure out a better way to defend himself. The next morning, Haruka jolts awake, half expecting to find a monster breathing down his neck. Nervously, he peeks outside his tent. To his relief, nothing attacked him overnight. Apparently, his so-called useless skill items actually have anti-monster properties. Who knew? But just because he's safe from harm doesn't mean he's safe from hunger. So, he pulls out a frying pan and starts cooking the mushrooms he gathered. If you're wondering where he got a frying pan, it was chilling in his villager bag, along with a full set of kitchen knives and even some beef jerky. At this point, Haruka is convinced that whoever stocked this bag before him was either a genius or a hoarder. With his stomach full, it's time to figure out what's next. His cave will work as a base for now, but he still needs a reliable food source and better defenses against monsters. Fortunately, with his contact lenses, food isn't a problem. He finds more mushrooms and herbs almost immediately. But the monster situation, that's a different story. Just then, his detection skill kicks in. Something's happening nearby. Haruka decides to investigate, but as soon as he arrives, he regrets it. The noise was caused by goblins. Not one, but two. And they both have strength stats higher than his own. Panic sets in. Can I even take them down? Should I just run? But deep down, he knows the truth. If he's going to live in this forest, he'll have to fight goblins eventually. Might as well get it over with now, while he has the element of surprise. The only problem? He's still armed with nothing but a stick. Desperate, he tries wrapping the stick in magic to see if it helps. To his surprise, it works. Without wasting another second, he lunges out of the bushes and smacks one of the goblins on the head. The poor creature is left dazed and confused, but Haruka doesn't give it time to recover. He immediately beats the absolute daylights out of it until it finally drops dead. One down, one to go. The second goblin charges at him, but Haruka manages to dodge just in time. Now that he's gotten a feel for the fight, he realizes something. The goblin's attacks are shockingly predictable. With newfound confidence, he effortlessly evades its swings and smacks it around like he's playing whack-a-mole. Finally, he finishes it off with a wave of magic. And just like that, Haruka wins his first fight against goblins. Haruka decides he's done enough for the day and heads back to his cave for some much-needed rest. Once there, he roasts some mushrooms for dinner again and inspects the club he looted from the goblin's corpse. While it boasts decent damage, it's heavy and has a short range, definitely not his style. For now, he'll stick to his trusty stick. Curious about his progress, he checks his stats and is surprised to find that he leveled up from the fight. Not only that, but all his existing stats doubled as a result. Now that's the kind of reward he can get behind. After his usual breakfast of roasted mushrooms again, Haruka starts to get sick of eating the same thing every day. He needs meat. The problem? He doesn't know how to hunt yet. And before he even thinks about hunting, he needs to learn how to enhance his own abilities first. The first skill he wants to test is magic fusion, which he recently acquired. A quick breakdown. It coats his entire body in magic, boosting his physical and magical defenses while also enhancing his strength. In theory, this should make him way more efficient in battle. Additionally, his appraisal skill has leveled up to level 2. Excited, he checks to see what's changed, only to find that every description now has a question mark next to it. Haruka, apparently unfamiliar with video games, spends a full minute trying to figure out what the mysterious question mark means before eventually giving up altogether. Deciding to focus on magic training instead, he heads outside. On his way out, he spots something on the ground. His heart races. Could it be meat? Nope. another mushroom. For a brief, delusional moment, Haruka had hoped that meat just grew on trees in this world. Unfortunately, reality slaps him in the face, and he realizes that he's not going to find any steak lying around in the dirt. Sigh. With that dream shattered, he gets back to training. Activating mana infusion, he takes a step forward, only to catapult several meters ahead. The physical boost makes his body feel ridiculously light, and with minimal effort, he zips around the forest like some kind of teleporting ninja. On top of that, his dexterity is significantly improved, letting him move and strike with precision. Now brimming with confidence, Haruka challenges 2 random goblins. Unlike yesterday, he one-shots them with ease. Feeling invincible, he starts thinking, maybe I can handle even more goblins. Then, he spots a group of 3. Yeah, never mind. Slowly, carefully, he backs away before he gets jumped. He decides he's worked hard enough for today and retreats to his cave, where he resumes tinkering with his magic. His nighttime experiments eventually lead to unexpected results. He discovers that he can now create coffee tables. Not exactly the ultimate weapon, but hey, progress is progress. By sticking to this daily routine, training in the day, experimenting with magic at night, Haruka eventually reaches the point where he can one-shot a goblin and craft a proper table. Feeling inspired, he uses his new magic crafting skills to build a gate for his cave. Now he can go out at night without worrying about unwanted guests. With his defenses in place, he decides it's time to finally get some meat. His first target, a rabbit. After chasing it down, he finally catches up and prepares to cook his first real meal in forever. But just as he's about to start, he notices something nearby. At first, he assumes it's a goblin, but upon closer inspection, it turns out to be something even worse. His classmates. Haruka's blood runs cold. The delinquents are here. And as if that wasn't bad enough, so are the popular girls, the gym bros, and the nerds. He doesn't mind the nerds too much. He used to hang out with them back in school. But still, he'd rather not deal with any of them right now. Then, he spots the student council group and the class rep. Now, while Haruka hates socializing, he has to admit the class rep was always nice to him. In fact, she might be the only person in class who ever treated him kindly. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to at least say hello. For a brief moment, he considers stepping forward. Then, reality hits him. If he reveals himself now, he'll be dragged into their mess. They'll want to talk, make plans, stick together. And if that happens, his peaceful, solitary life is over, right now. He has everything he ever wanted. No idle chatter, no taxes, no one to bother him. He's not about to ruin all that just because of some nostalgic sentiment. And so, Haruka makes his decision. He will ignore his classmates and conquer this world alone. Haruka quickly ducks into a bush as the delinquents approach. One of them swears he heard something and moves closer to the exact bush Haruka is hiding in. Holding his breath, Haruka braces himself, but when the delinquent peeks inside, all he finds is a bunny. Shrugging it off, he and the others continue walking. Relieved that he wasn't caught, Haruka decides to follow them to see if they're planning anything. However, instead of useful information, he overhears them having an intellectual discussion about their class VP's chest. Haruka sighs in disappointment, expecting at least some valuable insight. Still, with no laws to stop them, he worries about what they might do to the girls. He trusts the class rep to handle them, as she always does. But then he hears them discussing using Miracle Tanaka for his ability to do whatever they want. As they head back to camp, Haruka can tell they're up to no good, but stepping in would mean socializing, which he refuses to do. Instead, he returns to his cave and grills some mushrooms, only to be devastated when he notices his loner skill has leveled up, confirming that even his status board acknowledges his solitude. Probably a result of avoiding his classmates, but still, it's not the worst thing. If anything, he wants to level up more since he's only level 3. His growth is slow due to 2 skills he can't level: Jack of all trades and dummy skill. The first likely means he'll be decent at many things, but never a master. But the second, he has no clue. The best guess he can come up with is something puppet-related. Deciding it's not worth stressing over, he eats his dinner, still wishing for some actual meat. Calling it a night, Haruka settles into sleep, only to be interrupted by a loud ruckus outside. Annoyed but unable to ignore it, he steps out, expecting to find the delinquents causing trouble again. Surprisingly, it's not them, it's the nerds, locked in a fight against goblins and struggling. Haruka briefly considers helping but checks their stats first. With skills far superior to his and level 16 ranks, they should manage on their own. Figuring they'll be fine, he turns to leave. Just then, he spots 2 goblins sneaking up behind them. Already struggling, The nerds won't stand a chance if they're ambushed. Haruka debates stepping in, but then recalls the time they shared their holographic Charizard with him. Sigh, fine. They're worth saving. Without hesitation, he dashes out of the bushes, stick in hand, and one-shots both goblins in a single swing. The nerds, catching their breath, are shocked to see Haruka. After a quick reunion, they thank him, but he struggles to hold a conversation. He hasn't spoken to real people in ages. Still, he invites them back to his cave, where they're amazed by the setup. When he casually mentions using earth magic and crafting to remodel, they're even more impressed that he managed all this alone. Haruka prepares drinks and finally asks, "So, why are you guys wandering the woods this late at night?" The nerds suddenly fall silent when Haruka brings up the topic. After a few seconds, they finally admit they're actually on the run from the rest of the class. It all started when the class first got Isekai'd. At first, everyone was just shocked, but that quickly turned into panic once they realized they were stuck in this world. Some handled it better than others. The popular girls seemed more annoyed than scared. The gym bros were trying to figure things out, but had zero Isekai knowledge, and the nerds, this was their element. The class rep was just as confused as everyone else, but she had the common sense to realize that screaming in an unknown forest was a great way to attract monsters and get them all killed. She tried to calm everyone down, but it was already too late. A group of goblins had found them. With no idea how to handle this, the class rep panicked. So did everyone else, including the delinquents. The nerds, however, knew somebody had to do something, so they activated their skills and took down the goblins, with the gym bros joining in. Soon enough, all the goblins were defeated, but staying in the open wasn't safe. The class rep gathered everyone and suggested they find somewhere secure before another attack. A little while later, they set up camp by the river, and the nerds took it upon themselves to teach everyone how to survive using their Isekai knowledge. Tasks were divided evenly, and for a moment, everything seemed to be going well, until one of the popular girls suddenly said, "Nah, we're not doing any work." The class rep tried to reason with them, explaining that setting up tents was basic survival, but the girls refused to help. Seeing this, the delinquents also decided to slack off, leaving the nerds and the class rep to do everything. On top of that, the nerds had to deal with monsters attacking the camp, but they handled it for the sake of survival. They knew one of the delinquents had picked the puppeteer skill, so they wanted to level up fast, just in case. Meanwhile, the delinquents were also hunting at night, but only to grind levels so they could use their abilities. While eavesdropping, the nerds overheard them discussing plans to turn the girls into their slaves once they were strong enough. Realizing this was serious trouble, the nerds immediately warned the class rep. However, just a few days later, the delinquents had already gained enough levels to activate their skills, and their first target just so happened to be the class rep. Before they could act, the nerds ambushed them, beat them down, and sealed away their skills to prevent them from ever causing harm. Now powerless, the delinquents had no choice but to face the consequences. As expected, when the girls found out about the plan, they were furious. The delinquents were immediately kicked out of the camp. That should have been the end of it, but the delinquents were petty. That night, while the nerds were away, the delinquents returned just to mess with everyone and ended up burning the entire camp to the ground. By the time the nerds got back, everything was destroyed. Worse yet, the popular girls somehow blamed them for the disaster and started giving them a hard time for antagonizing the delinquents. The class rep stood up for them, reminding everyone that the nerds were the only reason anyone had survived so far. They appreciated her support, but honestly, they couldn't stay in a camp full of such ungrateful people. That's why they decided to run. After hearing their story, Haruka actually feels bad for them. To lift their spirits, he decides to host a mushroom feast for them that night. Haruka actually enjoyed spending time with others for once, but the next day, the nerds had to leave. They planned to head downstream to find a village and start their lives as adventurers. Before leaving, they invited Haruka to join them, considering him a friend. While Haruka felt the same way, he declined, believing his trash skills would only hold them back. That said, he was also a bit worried about the situation at the class camp, mostly because the class rep was still there, and she was the only other person in class he liked. So he decided to check things out. On the way, he randomly encountered a cobalt, which bit him a lot, but he ultimately managed to kill it and continue his journey. By nightfall, he arrived at the riverside, where the class camp should have been. But, to his surprise, the place was completely deserted. Assuming they must have moved, he used one of his detection skills to pick up some footprints and followed them until he eventually came across the popular girls. Of all his classmates, Haruka hated dealing with them the most, so he immediately tried to turn around and head home. But before he could escape, the girls started chasing him. Haruka could have easily outrun them, but he froze when he heard them say the word please. In all the years he had known them, please had never been in their vocabulary. For them to be this desperate, something serious must have happened. Deciding to hear them out, Haruka stopped to talk. The first thing they asked was if he knew where the nerds had gone. Haruka hesitated, thinking they just wanted to yell at them again. But to his surprise, they actually wanted to apologize. Now, they finally realized just how much the nerds had been doing for them and sincerely wanted to make amends. But by now, the nerds were long gone and there was no way they could catch up. To begin with, they couldn't even make it out of the woods alone, let alone defend themselves from monsters. Haruka asked if they had the resolve to do whatever it took to find the nerds and apologize. The girls, breaking down in tears, admitted they knew they wouldn't survive on their own. Desperate, they pleaded with Haruka to teach them how to survive in the wild. Haruka was so stunned by their sudden request that he agreed without thinking. As a result, his subjugate ability activated, and in an instant, the girls became his subservient followers. Now they blankly followed him, finishing off monsters whenever he got into a fight, then pulling out a magic crystal and presenting it to him like puppies looking for praise. Haruka was really not happy with how things were turning out. For now though, he noticed one of the girls had a small injury on her arm, so he handed her a healing potion he had made. Instead of using it on herself, she immediately used it on him instead. Haruka was getting sick of how the girls now did everything for his benefit, and he was really worried about how he was going to explain this to the class rep if he ran into her. And right on cue, the class rep just so happened to be walking through that part of the woods at that very moment. When the class rep gets Haruka's attention, he panics because he doesn't know what to say to her. Come to think of it, he doesn't even know her name. They've been in the same class since elementary school, and the class rep has always been nice to him, so she can't believe he never even bothered to learn her name. A few moments later, the rest of the girls from the class show up since, aside from the popular girls, everyone was following the class rep's orders. Speaking of the popular girls, the class rep notices them standing behind Haruka, but they look like they're currently sharing a single brain cell. Naturally, she assumes Haruka must have done something to them. He'd like to claim innocence, but the fact is, even if he didn't mean to, his skill turned the girls into his servants, and now he has no clue how to fix it. Haruka tries his best to explain the situation without making himself sound like the villain, but none of the girls believe him. Eventually, he gives up on proving his innocence and turns to walk away. Unfortunately, the class rep stops him and insists he stay while she checks on Shimazaki to make sure she's alright. Luckily, a little shaking was all it took to undo the subjugation, so Shimazaki reassures the class rep that she's fine. The class rep is relieved, and Haruka assumes that means he can leave now, but she still wants to figure out how the whole subjugation thing even happened in the first place. So, she refuses to let him go just yet. While the girls are talking, Haruka is left alone by a tree. Since he has nothing to do, he decides to practice his magic and work on expanding his house when he gets home. He tries to figure out how to create a basement, but he messes up and accidentally buries himself in the ground, neck deep. He's stuck like that until the class rep finds him, shocked to see him buried in the dirt when she only asked him to wait a few minutes. But, as she figures, boredom can make a guy do crazy things. She rushes over and pulls him out of the dirt. Once he's free, she apologizes for not trusting him earlier, since Shimazaki told her he was only trying to help. Haruka doesn't remember ever agreeing to help anyone, but the class rep and the other girls are already thanking him, so he just rolls with it. Now that everything is settled, Haruka wants to head back home. However, The girls get mad because he's planning to leave them stranded in the wilderness without any help. The class rep suddenly realizes Haruka mentioned having a house, so she asks him about it. He explains that he had some spare time on his hands, so he just kinda built one. The class rep can't believe he managed to build an entire house by himself while they've been struggling to maintain a simple camp. The other girls are equally impressed, so they huddle together and start discussing amongst themselves. The class rep asks how many people Haruka's house can accommodate. Based on how he designed it, about 240 people could fit. But he'd have to move some furniture around and temporarily empty the indoor pool. The class rep is beyond jealous of how well Haruka is doing for himself, and as much as she hates to ask, she wonders if she and the other girls can stay over for the night since they're all technically homeless at the moment. Haruka freaks out. It's one thing to invite a few guys over, but an entire class worth of girls? Yeah, that's a problem. He struggles to keep himself in check, but once he calms down, he agrees to lead them all to his house. Since he spent so much time roaming these woods, Haruka is far better at navigating than the others. One of his skills even gives him helpful pointers to stay on the right path. Eventually, he makes it back to his house with the girls, where they take a moment to catch their breath. The girls are stunned by the magnificence of Haruka's house. It's been so long since they've had a roof over their heads or experienced the wonders of indoor plumbing. So, the moment Haruka mentions there's a bath over in that direction, they frantically rush towards it, stripping down right in front of him. There's no way he can handle spending an entire night under the same roof with all of them, so he quickly sets up a tent outside to be alone and prepares to go to sleep. Just then, the class rep walks into his tent. There's something she wants to talk about. First, she thanks him for all his help, admitting she wouldn't have known what to do without him. After the nerds left, the gimmick bros, as she calls them, decided to leave as well, leaving the girls completely on their own. It was tough, but now that they've had a bath and a good meal, their spirits are high once again. Still, even though things eventually worked out, the class rep feels she failed as their representative because she couldn't handle the class's situation by herself. Haruka thinks she's being too hard on herself. After all, she was the one who kept the girls together and protected them. The class rep acknowledges that, but she believes they just got lucky since they didn't run into any monsters. If they had, she wouldn't have been able to protect anyone, unlike the nerds. Haruka doesn't think that's fair. The nerds practically spent their whole lives preparing for situations like this, so it makes sense that they could handle themselves well. Meanwhile, she was thrown into an Isekai with zero preparation, and considering that, she's actually done a great job. Hearing that makes the class rep feel a lot better, though she still can't help but feel her efforts pale in comparison to Haruka, who somehow built a fully functioning household in just a week. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside. But with everything that happened today, Haruka knows he's not getting any sleep tonight. Early the next morning, Haruka wakes up to find one of the girls sitting outside his tent, telling him breakfast is ready. It takes him a moment to process what's going on, but when he does, he groggily says he wants to sleep a little longer. The girl, however, refuses to accept that answer and straight up crawls on top of him to force him out of bed. Defeated, Haruka gives in and asks what's for breakfast. He was expecting the usual mushroom soup with a side of extra mushrooms, but to his surprise, breakfast is actually fish today. He gets so excited that he accidentally headbutts the girl. She's slightly hurt, but Haruka couldn't care less, because finally, he gets to eat something that isn't mushrooms. He absolutely loves it. The class rep doesn't understand why he's so hyped about eating fish, considering he's been living next to a river this entire time. While that may be true, Haruka sucks at fishing, so he's never actually caught any before. But since the girls seem to be eating fish regularly, they must have a reliable way of catching them. Curious, he asks to see how they do it. The class rep agrees and takes Haruka to the river, along with one of the girls who has a lightning magic skill. He asks her how she catches fish, and she just casually explains that she electrocutes the water until the fish stop being alive. Haruka is amazed and begs her to do it one more time. The girl doesn't really want to, but since Haruka has been helping them, she agrees. She spawns another lightning ball, but before she can throw it into the river, Haruka takes it and seals it using his packing skill. He then tosses it into the water, catching some fish himself. But on top of that, he also acquires lightning magic, meaning he won't be needing the lightning girl's help anymore. The class rep is shocked and asks what he just did. Haruka explains that by using his packing skill on a particular element, he can gain that type of magic. It's probably an effect caused by a combination of his many skills. While it's definitely useful, he still doesn't think it's that impressive. After all, he still considers most of his skills to be useless. As the other girls play in the river, Haruka sits with the class rep and asks what they plan to do next. She says the details aren't set in stone yet, but they're planning to head to the nearest village to try and catch up with the nerds. However, if they plan to make it out of this forest on their own, they'll need to level up first. Hearing this, Haruka offers to help them train before they leave. A short while later, all the girls gather in the forest for Haruka's training camp. Before they begin, he asks about their current levels. The girls tell him they're all above level 16, which makes Haruka instantly depressed. After all this time surviving in the forest, he's still only level 7. At this point, he's starting to wonder if they even need his help at all. To find out, he sets up a small test. He has them fight a group of kobolds, thinking it should be easy since the monsters are only level 6. However, just a few moments later, all the girls are on the ground, defeated, having gotten their asses thoroughly handed to them. The girls had no idea that the kobolds would actually fight back, so after their defeat, they retreat to regroup and come up with a new strategy. For some reason, the strategy meeting takes place inside Haruka's magic tent. Since his tent can't expand, they all fit inside, but Haruka still has no clue why they chose to gather there. After a bit of deliberation, the girls head back out, confident they won't lose this time. Haruka is glad they're motivated, but honestly, he doesn't think their chances are much better than before. Once they leave, the girl from this morning approaches Haruka, saying she wants to apologize for her behavior earlier. She admits that she was intentionally getting close to him, just to see if he would take advantage of the situation if given the chance. At first, she didn't trust him, but after everything he's done, giving them food, shelter, and even helping them learn to fight, she now feels like she can trust him. She tells him she'll be back tomorrow to wake him up with breakfast. Haruka is happy she trusts him, but he still doesn't know her name, so he just decides to call her Fish Girl. Haruka is delighted to receive breakfast from Fish Girl, but his excitement fades when he overhears the other girls discussing their revenge match against the kobolds. Before they can leave, however, the class rep calls them back, reminding them that if they rush in now, they're definitely going to lose again. She suggests that they train first by fighting goblins instead. However, once the girls actually engage the goblins, it doesn't go well. Despite the loss, some of them still believe they're ready to fight the kobolds again, though a bunch of them suddenly start pretending to be sick to avoid more combat. Haruka doesn't think this will end well, so he stays on standby, ready to intervene if necessary. But to his surprise, the girls actually learn from their mistakes against the goblins. This time, they work together, using teamwork and strategy to finally defeat the kobolds. The class rep congratulates everyone on their victory, and Haruka is relieved, because this means the girls can finally handle themselves and won't need to stay with him anymore. He believes he can finally get back to his peaceful life as a loner. But just as he starts feeling hopeful, class rep walks over and thanks him for agreeing to come with them to the nearest village. Haruka knows for a fact that he never agreed to that, but the class rep is extremely insistent. In the end, he gives in and agrees to go with her. A little while later, everyone packs their things, ready to leave the forest. But before heading out, Haruka reminds them that they have no idea what they might run into, so they should all keep their guard up. One of the boys from their class is running for his life. He makes the mistake of looking back, only to trip over a rock. Now completely cornered by his pursuer, he has nowhere left to run. A moment later, he is strangled to death on the spot. Haruka's top priority right now is ensuring the girls' safety, since the delinquents are sure to come after them. To do that, he needs to get them out of the forest as soon as possible. A little while later, Haruka encounters a giant orc. Seeing this as a good training opportunity, he decides to teach the girls how to defend themselves properly. He tells them to stand back and watch as he takes care of it. Haruka charges at the orc with his stick, and in response, the orc raises its club to smash him into the ground. However, when the monster looks down, it realizes Haruka is gone. Where did he go? Turns out, Haruka is hiding behind a tree. With how slow the orc is, there's no way it can hit him. But if Haruka wants to defeat it, he needs a plan. He remembers the nerds telling him that physical attacks aren't effective against orcs. The safest way to defeat them is by using magic. Haruka quickly pulls up his status window to check his available magic. Thanks to his packing skill, he has access to all elements. But before he can cast a spell, the orc finds his hiding spot and destroys the tree with its club. Haruka is forced to dodge a series of attacks until he finally has enough. Appearing behind the orc, he strikes it with his stick, and just like that, the orc drops dead. Wait, what? Haruka is shocked. He wasn't expecting that, considering physical attacks aren't supposed to work against orcs. The girls, however, are upset because they didn't actually get to learn anything from watching him. So, Haruka apologizes and promises to use magic next time. The next time Haruka spots an orc minding its own business, he prepares a flame spell and casually throws it at the monster. The fireball hits the orc's face, and just like that, the orc goes down and never gets back up. The girls are even more frustrated. If Haruka keeps instantly killing everything, they'll never learn how to defend themselves properly. Later that night, the group has a lot of orc meat on hand, so they celebrate with a barbecue. While everyone is having fun, Haruka is busy in the background, setting up traps around the area to ensure they won't be attacked in their sleep. His magic tent has stealth properties that prevent detection by enemies, so with this setup, he thinks they'll be safe. Next, he plans the route for the journey tomorrow. Activating his math skill, he starts analyzing the best path ahead when suddenly, his perception skill alerts him to someone nearby. Curious, Haruka goes to investigate. From the shadows, he sees 4 male figures emerging. At first, he fears it might be the delinquents, but as the figures step into the light, he recognizes them. It's the gym bros. Haruka lets out a sigh of relief. At least he won't have to fight them. Meanwhile, the class rep has been looking for Haruka and notices him talking to the 4 guys from a distance. Even though they aren't hostile, Haruka still wonders what the gym bros are doing out here. He assumed they were after the girls, but the bros adamantly deny it. Instead, they reveal that they came here looking for Haruka. He decides to believe them, but he still doesn't understand why they went through so much effort to avoid the girls. The bros explain that they don't trust the girls. They also inform Haruka of a skill, even worse than charm and puppeteer, one that the delinquents were desperate to obtain. Haruka remembers something. He recalls seeing an ability called hijack in his status window. That's exactly what the gym bros were referring to. The delinquents had been extremely vocal about how they wanted to use their mind control skills. However, not once did they mention hijack, and she's keeping it hidden from everyone. Haruka decides to mess with the bros a little. He casually tells them that he might be the one with the hijack skill. However, the gym bros aren't even fazed. In fact, they actually seem relieved. Why? Because they know Haruka is such a loner that he would never actively seek out people just to hijack their skills. Haruka chuckles and admits that he doesn't have the hijack skill. However, he does have a subjugate skill, one that lets him turn people into his pets. But since he prefers not to use it, it doesn't matter. The bros simply wanted to warn him about the dangers of the hijack skill. Before leaving, they tell him they'll keep an eye on the delinquents since they seem suspicious. Before they go, they also ask Haruka to apologize to the class rep and the rest of the girls for them. The next morning, the girls seem more energetic than usual, draining Haruka's patience. As he steps away, the class rep approaches him, clearly nervous. She's about to confess that she has the hijack skill, but Haruka cuts her off. He already knew. She's shocked since only the nerds were aware of her skill. She asks why he never said anything, and why he still chose to help her. Haruka simply shrugs. It wasn't a big deal to him. She worries that he should be afraid of her, since hijack lets her steal another person's skills by killing them, but Haruka isn't concerned. The nerds knew about it too, yet they sealed the delinquent's skills but left hers alone, which means they trusted her. Haruka trusts her too, because he knows she'd never kill anyone. Moved by his words, the class rep tears up, and Haruka finds it amusing. She's been crying a lot lately. She blames him for that. After traveling a good distance, Haruka calls for a break and pulls out juice to sell. The problem? None of the girls have money. One of them offers to pay in other ways, but the class rep shuts that down immediately. No money, no juice. Back on the road, they're ahead of schedule, but won't reach the village before nightfall, so they'll have to camp again. Near a river, Haruka sees an opportunity to test something out. He asks the class rep to watch over the girls while he scouts alone. She wants to come, but Haruka speeds off before she can follow. Running through the woods, Haruka activates magic boost to enhance his body and casts weight magic to make himself lighter. With this combo, he's faster than ever. He suddenly has a brilliant idea. If he jumps high enough, maybe he can fly. So, he launches himself into the sky and then plummets straight back down, crash landing into the forest floor. Almost died, definitely not trying that again. When he stumbles back to camp injured, the class rep freaks out. He casually explains that he jumped too high, gravity happened, and he almost died. Furious, the class rep scolds him for being an idiot. To make up for it, Haruka offers to make her some berry juice, since he at least spotted berries while falling. She refuses, but Juice Girl immediately asks for some. The next day, the group sets out again. Things go smoothly except for one girl getting lost and some surprise orc encounters. But despite these hiccups, they finally make it out of the forest. The girls are ecstatic since the village isn't far now. Haruka, however, stays on edge. Being out in the open makes them vulnerable. With the hills blocking his view, he checks his stat window to see if he has any skills that might help. To his surprise, a new skill appears, Airwalk. He must have unlocked it from his failed flying attempt. Testing it out, he starts walking on air. The class rep panics when she realizes Haruka is missing, only to look up and see him floating in the sky. He waves down at her, just scouting ahead. From the air, everything seems peaceful at first, but then he spots a group of villagers being attacked by wolves. Haruka descends and informs the class rep that he saw some people being attacked by wolves. She insists they go help, but Haruka is cautious. What if they're bandits? The girls want to rescue them, but they're too far away to make it in time. Haruka suggests ignoring them and moving on, but the class rep grabs his arm, pleading with him to reconsider. She promises that if they turn out to be bandits, she'll fight them off. But if they're innocent people, she wants to save them. Haruka knew she'd insist on helping, even at her own risk, but the girls still suck at fighting. So, he decides to handle it alone. The villagers are too far away to run to, so Haruka tries something new. He casts Magic Boost and Weight Magic, then adds a powerful wind spell to launch himself forward. The spell is so strong that it sucks in the class rep, but Haruka doesn't notice. He's too focused on airwalking toward the village. Mid-air, he feels something tugging on his cape. Turning around, he's shocked to see the class rep clinging to him for dear life. Terrified, she explains that she got caught in the wind spell and now can't let go without falling to her death. Welp, she's coming along for the ride. As they approach the fight, the class rep yells for Haruka to stop. About that, he never actually planned a way to stop. They crash land right into the battle, instantly wiping out all the wolves and knocking the class rep unconscious. The surviving villagers are stunned. While the class rep is still out cold, the leader of the group thanks Haruka for saving them. He introduces himself as Ofter and his friend as Gadech. Turns out they were hired by the Adventurers Guild to exterminate wolves attacking merchants, but they underestimated the danger and nearly got wiped out. Their carriage was destroyed, so they'll have to carry everything back to town. With nothing to do until the rest of the girls catch up, Haruka shares some roasted mushrooms. Gadech is shocked. These are stamina cap mushrooms, an extremely rare type that instantly restores stamina. Soon, the rest of the class arrives and are thrilled to meet Ofter's party. They all get along well, and Ofter offers to guide them to town. Before long, the group finally arrives at the town of Omi, overjoyed to be back in civilization. The delinquents have been leveling up non-stop for days. Now, with their newfound strength, they plan to get revenge on the girls. But first, they need their puppeteer and charm skills unsealed. Their next target, the nerds. Arrival in the city. The girls excitedly explore the city, amazed by civilization, but the class rep reminds them they are broke and still have important tasks to complete. She rushes off to round them up, while Haruka smiles. His job is done, and now he can return to his peaceful loner life. The class rep struggles to keep the girls under control, so she asks Haruka for help, but he's already relaxing in the shade, ignoring the chaos. Frustrated, she blows a whistle to get everyone's attention and lays out a plan. Sell their loot at the Adventurers Guild. Register as adventurers and book an inn. Ask if anyone has seen the nerds. The popular girls scoff at treating the nerds like an afterthought, but Haruka mocks them for caring so much. Meeting the guild master. At the Adventurers Guild, Haruka instantly feels unwelcome. Everyone is giving them dirty looks. Before he can slip away, Ofter informs him that the guild master wants to meet him. Sensing bad news, Haruka sends the class rep to handle registrations while he reluctantly goes upstairs. The people there look even scarier, but to his surprise, the guild master only wanted to thank him for saving After's party. Relieved, Haruka heads back down and dumps a massive pile of magic stones at the counter to sell. The attendant panics. He's just dropped 2 days worth of overtime on her desk. She asks him to come back tomorrow, as she needs time to appraise them all. Haruka doesn't mind waiting. Haruka gets rejected as an adventurer. With the girls done registering, Haruka confidently steps up to register himself, only to be immediately rejected. The guild requires adventurers to be at least level 10 and level 20 for solo adventurers. Haruka is level 9. Worse, his loner skill prevents him from joining parties, meaning he's unemployed indefinitely. A suspicious inn and a big payday. That night, the class rep leads them to their lodging, which looks suspiciously like a love hotel. Haruka panics, but it's just a normal inn. They say goodnight and head to their rooms. The next morning, after breakfast, the class rep excitedly announces that the town is safe, so everyone is free to explore. The girls eagerly plan a shopping trip, while Haruka prepares to leave for the forest after he gets paid for his magic stones. At the guild, Haruka is met with sincere apologies. They don't have enough money to pay him all at once. Even the guild master personally asks if he'd be willing to accept installments. Haruka agrees, and in the meantime, he gets the amount for the stones already appraised, 8 million era. Haruka gets rich and immediately goes broke. The money in this world has the same value as Earth's, meaning Haruka is now filthy rich. His payout is massive because he brought in more magic stones than the guild has ever seen and also took down the green wolves. Since he's loaded, Haruka decides to do some shopping before heading back to the forest. Gadich offers to take him somewhere special. Haruka assumes it's an adult establishment, but to his disappointment, it's just a rundown weapon shop. This shop collects rare dungeon gear, and Gadich thinks it's perfect for Haruka. The place looks sketchy, but the gear is top tier, so Haruka spends all day browsing and buying whatever he can afford. The necklace with a hidden power. While shopping, Haruka finds a mysterious necklace. His appraisal skill only gives a vague description. Fits 7. He remembers seeing the same description when he analyzed his villager set, so he asks the shopkeeper what it means. The shopkeeper explains that it allows up to 7 item effects to stack and be used at once. That means if it works with his villager set, Haruka can stack even more buffs onto his equipment. He's about to start testing combinations, but then, oops, that was expensive. While holding one of the items, something reacts unexpectedly, and before he realizes it, all the items fuse into one. The shopkeeper is furious. Haruka hasn't paid for anything yet, and that gear was worth over 10 million era. Haruka panics. He's completely broke. Gadich pleads with the shopkeeper to accept Haruka's 8 million instead. Haruka's escape plan goes wrong. The next day, Haruka sulks over being broke. He wants to go out and farm more crystals, but only registered adventurers can leave town. He already tried sneaking out with some girls, but the class rep caught him and yelled at him again. Time for plan B. His villager cloak fused with an invisibility cloak, so now he can go completely unnoticed. Using it, he sneaks past the class rep and the girls, but feels guilty for leaving without saying anything. Still, if she found out, she'd definitely stop him. Haruka successfully escapes the lodging and heads for the city wall, but then makes a critical mistake. He removes his invisibility cloak too soon, and just as he jumps over the wall, a couple of girls spot him. Panicking, Haruka loses focus and accidentally smashes his family jewels against the wall. Haruka's escape plan fails again. As Haruka crashes to the ground, he yells at the athletic girls for startling him. They were just curious about why he was jumping over the wall. Then he realizes one of them is missing. Using his perception skill, he finds her, about to strip naked in the middle of the street. Horrified, Haruka and the girls rush over to stop her. They manage to intervene in time, but his escape plan is ruined. Haruka tries again. The next day, the girls head out on a guild quest, and Haruka asks to join them. The class rep refuses. She doesn't trust him after his attempted escape. She assures him they won't be gone long. Haruka pretends to wait but has no intention of staying. This time, he keeps his invisibility cloak on until he's past the city gates. Now, nothing is stopping him from returning to his house in the forest, ignoring every side quest. On the way back, he spots a destroyed village, ignores it. A horde of goblins would be great for XP, but ignores them too. A carriage under attack by bandits, people inside begging for help, still ignores it. But as he tries to leave, the bandits attack him. The bandits make a mistake. Haruka warns them that he wants no part in this, but they refuse to listen. With a single fire spell, he roasts them. The staff he's holding is unexpectedly powerful, a result of his forced item combination from the shop. As the bandits get back up, Haruka tries to talk his way out again. They acknowledge his magic is strong, but assume he's weak in close combat, so they rush him. Big mistake. Haruka knocks them all down effortlessly, with one hit each. When a jobless man wins a fight, the bandits can't believe they're losing to one guy and ask what Haruka's job is. He doesn't have one. That stings. Desperate, the bandits check his status and see he's only level 9. They believe they can still win by using weapon skills, which are only available from level 20 and up. Haruka knows weapon skills are dangerous, so he gets worried, but then realizes they shout their attacks before using them. He dodges every single one until they pass out from exhaustion. An unskippable side quest appears. Just as he thinks it's over, a girl approaches him from behind. Marielle, a noble, thanks Haruka for saving her, but she also points out that he tried to ignore her at first, so she's not sure if she should be thanking him at all. Still, she appreciates his help and has a favor to ask. Her father is the lord of a certain city, and she wants Haruka to escort her back for safety. Haruka refuses at first, but then she mentions a reward. Now he's interested. Haruka's big mistake. On the way, Marielle asks where he was coming from. Haruka rants about the shitty city he just left, complaining about the guild not having enough money to pay him, the guild refusing to register him as an adventurer, the city not letting him leave without a permit. Marielle suddenly starts crying. Confused, Haruka realizes too late she's the daughter of the Lord of Omi, and this carriage is heading right back there. Haruka instantly regrets everything. Meanwhile, in the forest, the gym bros and the delinquents are squaring up for a fight. The delinquent leader doesn't hesitate to kill, but just as he raises his sword, he gets stabbed from behind. After their first ally fell, the remaining delinquents grasped the danger they were in. However, their true enemy wasn't Haruka or the gym bros, it was a lone swordsman fighting independently. With swift, ruthless efficiency, the swordsman took down each delinquent, leaving no survivors. When the remaining ones tried to flee, he intercepted them, ensuring no one escaped without his permission. Meanwhile, Haruka dreaded returning to Omi, but Marielle wasn't having it. She gave him a pointed look and dragged him back to her father's mansion, ignoring his protests. Feeling uneasy inside the grand estate, Haruka plotted an escape, but before he could slip away, Marielle caught him. Frustrated, she called him out, insisting he stay and accept his reward. To prove her sincerity, Marielle led him to a lavish banquet. Haruka, abandoning all thoughts of leaving, stuffed his face. Afterward, she had a maid bring his cash reward, along with an official ID, allowing him to freely enter and leave Omi. In return, she simply hoped he would remember the town's name. Haruka, however, was far more interested in the texture of the pudding than any of her words. Blushing, Marielle murmured that she had dressed up for him, only for him to completely ignore her efforts. On the 22nd, Haruka returned to the inn, assuring his group he hadn't tried to escape. The girls were suspicious, but Haruka played dumb until some of them dropped the subject and left on a guild mission. Before departing, the class rep warned him that he wasn't allowed to leave the city. Haruka agreed, but the moment he was alone, he flashed a sly grin, readying his next escape attempt. This time, he had a trump card, Marielle's ID. Before leaving, he used his reward money to stock up on supplies and, most importantly, real food, anything but mushrooms. He also left a note for the class rep, simply stating he was going to check on the athletes and urging the girls to keep leveling up. With everything set, he headed to the exit, where a burly soldier stood guard. Flashing his new ID, Haruka easily secured his release from Omi. This time, if he saw a carriage under attack, he'd ignore it and keep moving. Eventually, Haruka reached his beloved forest, where mushrooms thrived, fish swam, and monsters roamed. It felt like home. Eager to reach his cave, he resumed his run, effortlessly defeating an orc along the way. However, its appearance was unusual, as such creatures typically stay deeper in the forest. As sunset approached, Haruka sensed something was off. Then he saw it, a bloodstain on a rock. At first, he doubted it belonged to the nerds, who were experienced survivors. Instead, he feared for the athletes. Following a trail of blood and footprints, he ran until he found them. The athletes were barely alive, slumped against a rock, badly wounded. Without hesitation, Haruka threw them healing potions, saving them. Their leader, Kazazaki, revived just enough to ask if the girls were safe. Haruka assured him they were secure in the city. Relieved, Kazazaki felt at peace, believing they had done their part to protect the class. Later that night, Haruka learned that all the delinquents were dead, the nerds had vanished. The bully killer was an unknown force, unstoppable and ruthless. This mysterious swordsman not only eliminated the delinquents, he also stole all their weapons. Kazazaki believed it was all part of his plan. His real target wasn't the delinquents. It was the class representative. She possessed the abduction skill, a power that let her steal abilities from those she killed. Haruka worried only he and the nerds were supposed to know about that. But the swordsman had asked about her. The athlete survived on purpose. The swordsman spared them, likely hoping they would eventually seek out the class rep, giving him the perfect opportunity to strike. Haruka didn't like where this was going. The athletes, near death, warn Haruka that the mysterious swordsman will follow the blood trail. Their leader believes they have a chance if they fight together. Haruka, however, hates getting involved in conflicts. He only wants a peaceful, solitary life. But duty calls, and he can't ignore the situation. He agrees to help, but alone, sending the athletes back to the city to protect the women. Though he knows it'd be safer with backup, he realizes that if the swordsman kills everyone, no one will be left to protect the girls. Meanwhile, in Omi, the class rep remains anxious, even after reading Haruka's letter. The athletes inform Haruka that the swordsman's most powerful attack leaves him vulnerable. Haruka knows he needs to train to exploit this flaw. He defeats goblins, but quickly realizes he needs stronger opponents. Fate leads him to the Goblin King, a perfect level-up opportunity. He dodges its club and strikes with a spell, winning the battle. But before he can celebrate, a new threat emerges, the Goblin Emperor, level 50. Haruka, at level 9, knows he can't win in a fair fight, but escape is unlikely. He uses his strongest skills to launch a desperate attack, landing a powerful hit, but the Emperor regenerates and sends him flying with a brutal counter. Barely conscious, Haruka forces himself to keep fighting. His friends depend on him. As dawn breaks, exhausted but victorious, he cheers, he's finally level 11. Returning to his cave, he discovers new skills, including a spell that seamlessly combines different magics for instant attacks. Shortly after, a man approaches, Tanaka, the quiet boy who once seemed like a victim but clearly had other plans. Meanwhile, the girls return to Omi, only to find the athletes waiting by the city wall. Kazazaki explains that Haruka stayed behind to fight an enemy alone. Back in the forest, Haruka greets Tanaka with sarcasm, sensing something is off. Tanaka, however, is frustrated. He had planned to use the delinquents to reach the class rep, but the athletes ruined everything. At that moment, Haruka realizes the truth. Tanaka was behind everything from the start. Tanaka admits that he used the delinquents to divide the class. When Haruka demands to know about the rest of their classmates, Tanaka coldly responds, "They're all dead," but his real goal, unlocking the abduction skill. Haruka blocks Tanaka's escape, but Tanaka decides to kill him instead. With a gesture, Tanaka hurls rocks toward Haruka, demonstrating his power. He taunts Haruka, reminding him that back in the White Room, where everyone selected skills, he chose last, deliberately picking only the worst abilities. Smirking, he asks, "Do you really think you can beat me with those useless skills?" Tanaka then summons even larger rocks, forcing Haruka to defend. But then, Tanaka activates his unique ability, Tweak. Instantly, Haruka's body twitches uncontrollably, making it hard to move. Despite the struggle, Haruka dodges the rocks, only for Tanaka to summon crystal spikes beneath his feet. He barely escapes again, but the effort drains him, his body unnaturally heavy. Tanaka, impressed, asks how long Haruka suspected him. Haruka reveals he had doubts from the start. Tanaka didn't fit in with the delinquents or the nerds, making his actions suspicious. Tanaka, unfazed, admits he started his scheme the moment they were teleported. Though he missed out on the hijack skill, he found Tweak, which lets him manipulate others subtly. With that, he controlled the delinquents, leading them to their downfall. Now he's done talking. Vines bind Haruka's foot. Confident in his victory, Tanaka unleashes a deadly fire spell, but to his shock, Haruka absorbs the flames into his staff, a result of the herb fused into it. Wasting no time, Haruka counters, aiming to strike while Tanaka is stunned. But it was a trap. Tanaka had only been pretending. Drawing a hidden sword, he blocks Haruka's attack and forces him back. Now, Tanaka summons all his stolen weapons, grinning. This is his chance to test them all. He lunges at Haruka, switching weapons with every swing, leaving Haruka struggling to keep up. Forced onto the defensive, Haruka barely fends off the unpredictable onslaught. Hoping to escape, Haruka dives into the bushes, but a powerful strike sends him flying across the river. Outmatched, Haruka wonders, how is Tanaka wielding so many weapons and skills at once? Tanaka approaches, demanding his surrender, but Haruka rises, asking if Tanaka is using a copycat skill to mimic their classmates' abilities. Tanaka smirks and confirms it. His plan was to copy the class rep's hijack skill, kill her, and gain the real thing. Afterward, he intended to kill everyone to steal their powers. Tanaka strikes again, but Haruka dodges, only for it to be an illusion. Realizing his current strategy won't work, Haruka lowers his staff, pretending to surrender. Tanaka takes the bait, charging at him, only for Haruka to sidestep at the last moment, mimicking Goku's Ultra Instinct. Taunting him, Haruka exposes Tanaka's biggest weakness. He can only use each copied skill 3 times. Tanaka panics, his perfect plan is falling apart. Haruka had figured it out early on and had been baiting him into wasting his copied moves. Furious, Tanaka launches one final assault, using his last remaining copied skills. Haruka dodges, counters with a powerful kick, and sends him flying. Sensing an opening, Haruka moves in to end the fight, but Tanaka suddenly unleashes a powerful energy blast, forcing Haruka to pause. Determined not to lose, Tanaka summons a dagger, slashes twice, and vanishes, reappearing above Haruka. Haruka dodges, but it was a feint. Tanaka is actually behind a rock, charging his ultimate skill, Instant Death. Before Haruka can react, Tanaka lands the strike. Haruka collapses instantly. Tanaka laughs triumphantly, stomping on Haruka's head. Pathetic, he sneers, turning to leave. But then, Haruka stands up. Tanaka freezes in shock. Why are you leaving so soon? Haruka asks, brushing himself off. Tanaka, furious, demands to know how he survived instant death. Haruka reveals his general health skill, which grants resistance to status effects, including instant death. He also has max luck, which reduces the chance of instant death dramatically. Tanaka, still in disbelief, asks why Haruka collapsed if he was fine. Haruka smirks, I faked it. Tanaka insists Haruka shouldn't be able to move under Tweak's control. Haruka reveals another secret, his skill blockhead, which lets him control others like puppets. By using it on himself, he cancelled out Tweak's effects. Realizing he's been completely outplayed, Tanaka snaps. He unleashes a flurry of weapon skills, but Haruka blocks them effortlessly. Defeated, Tanaka collapses to his knees. He reflects on his boredom in school, his genius beyond his classmates, and his desire for something exciting. When he was transported to this world, he saw his perfect opportunity, a game where he could kill and collect skills, becoming unstoppable. But now he's losing to someone with useless skills. In one last desperate charge, Tanaka recklessly attacks, but Haruka easily disarms him. Thinking Tanaka is out of tricks, Haruka prepares to finish him off, but suddenly, Tanaka's sword flies back into his hand and pierces Haruka. Haruka stumbles, realizing Tanaka had been hiding a remote control ability. Tanaka, grinning, declares, I win after all. He slashes at Haruka, ready to end the fight. But Haruka isn't done yet. Haruka unleashes his gamut skill, delivering a strike Tanaka can't evade. Tanaka collapses, unconscious. Exhausted, Haruka mutters that while he doesn't have overpowered abilities, he still has his own tricks. But the damage finally catches up to him. His body gives out, and he drops to his knees. Just before he blacks out, memories of the class rep and his friends flash through his mind until someone catches him. Haruka opens his eyes and sees the nerds by his side. Though disappointed that they arrived late, they urge him to complain later and give him healing potions. As they support him back to town, Haruka asks why they were in the forest. The nerds explain they had just returned from a hunting trip when they heard about his fight from the athletes. They rushed to help, but arrived a bit too late. Upon reaching Omi, they find everyone eagerly waiting at the gates. The girls surround Haruka, calling him their prize, but he shyly steps away, opting to high-five the leader of the athletes instead. The girls pull him inside, and even the TikTok star of the group apologizes to the nerds for past actions. For the first time, Haruka feels feels like this is the happy ending everyone wanted. Realizing he no longer has a part to play, Haruka tries to slip away unnoticed. But before he can escape, the class rep catches him. Shocked, Haruka freezes. She suddenly hugs him, confessing she was truly worried. Haruka apologizes, but the class rep isn't satisfied. An apology isn't enough. She reveals that she's gathered all the girls to give him a stern talking to for sneaking out of the city without a word. Haruka panics, but he has no choice as the girls drag him back into the city to scold him.